I'm Vicky, the Carpenter's daughter. Welcome back to another instalment of remodelling this living room slash dining room, which is just around the corner, but we are focusing in here today, dog biscuit, and that is to plasterboard this recessed wall here, ready to put a TV there, which is why we've got electrics, aerial point and an Ethernet socket to sort out later. Anyway, again, I took what he said on board because I was going to dot and dab, and then I thought, do I foam it to the wall instead to reduce the mess? Originally, I did like the idea of battening it, but at the same time, I want to do dot and dab because I've never done it before. But you did say, what if you want to add some cables hidden behind the wall later on? Why don't you just batten it? And okay, I quite like the idea of it, so that's what I'm doing. Also, I like the idea of adding more wood to the area where we will be mounting a bracket later anyway. So I really want to get cracking with this one. So we will be using full sheets of plasterboard, which is 1200 by 2.4 meters. And this is just an offcut from previously. And when I put battens on the wall, I'll be putting them every 400, starting from the corner. And when it comes to the end of a full sheet, I need that to meet halfway between the batten. And the battens are, they're not the biggest, they are 19mm thick by 38mm. And they're 2.4 meters long. So I've not needed to cut anything down. And that's normally the height of an average house. So the first thing I've already done is chipped away any protruding bits of mortar along the edges. I've not done it all over because I'm spacing them out every 400mm, just so I can get a flat finish to the wall. So before I mount these battens to the wall, I just want to explain, some of them aren't the straightest. So anything that looks a bit bowy, I'm just going to leave to one side for now. I'm sure I could use those for extra supports. Unfortunately, that's what happens when you buy them in a pack. You can't inspect them individually. Oh my God, I didn't think they were this bad. That's pretty good. Right, it's not perfect, but it'll do. So if there's anything bowing like that in the middle, this is the curve that I want facing the wall. And then I can straighten it up by mounting the top and bottom to the wall. Now you might be wondering, why is that important? Because I'm fixing it to the wall. I'm only going to be putting a screw in the wall every other brick. I don't want to put loads and loads of screws in because I also need plenty of surface to mount my plasterboard to it. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to fix this to the top of this wooden beam with a drywall screw. And I need to bury it as well. And make sure that is propped up. God, it's hot up here again. There. I completely forgot to say, I've already been around here just to check to see if everything is plumb. And if you look over there, it more or less is everywhere. Again, exactly the same. But what I might find is I may have to use the odd packer if, for example, because it's not the thickest of timber, while I'm mounting it, if you look here, see, if I get that, it's up there, and that looks plumb there, but as I put the odd screw in, it might just pull it in a little bit. So I might just put the odd packer in there just to keep it absolutely straight. Just to show you as well, it's more or less level there. But what I want to do now is fix this to the brickwork. I'm not going to fix it to the bottom brick because that is where the damp-proof course is. So I'm going to fix it in the middle of this brick instead. And that, for example, if it tightens too much, it does look like it will move a little bit, so I may put a packer there. So what I'm going to be pre-drilling with is a 6mm masonry drill bit. And instead of using raw plugs and screws, I'm using masonry screws, which look a little bit different. If I have a problem, I may have to go up to a 6.5mm, but I'm going to try and avoid that because we've noticed this breeze block can have a tendency to crumble a little bit. I've also not put any tape on this drill bit because that's how long my screws are, which are 82mm. That takes into account the thickness of this wood and this screw. But before I drill with my masonry drill bit, I want to make life a little bit easier and drill with a wood drill bit through the wood, and then we'll change for the masonry one. These screws also come with the Torx bit that you need to screw them to the wall. Right, do you see how it pulled it in there? And it was very early on that I realised I needed to get it level with packers first time, because removing them to add packers, then screw back, meant the screws could lose the grip completely, meaning I'd have to drill and screw in a totally different place. Oh, that's not good. Also, I found the damp-proof course layer protruded a bit more than the breeze box, so I had to pack the battens more than I expected. That's better. So in my walls case, I've actually found it's better to pre-drill with a 5mm masonry drill bit rather than a 6. I then pre-drilled through the wood every other brick with my wood drill bit, but this time using a countersink bit to ensure my screw heads didn't protrude during the plasterboarding stage. Then moved on to drilling with my masonry bit. It was rather time consuming, constantly checking with the spirit level and testing with different packers, but I wanted my first batten to be bang on as it dictated a level line for the rest of the wall. So I've got my first batten in. Before I do the others, I just want to work out the last one for the plasterboard sheet. So this is just an offcut, exactly the same length, 1.2 metres. And the end of that is there, which I'm marking on the ceiling, but that is my between point of one of the battens. Once I've mounted that one, it should give me enough surface area to screw 2 sheets onto it. But I can't put that one up yet because I've got plaster in the way. To absolutely make sure that the end of my plasterboard would meet in the middle of the batten, I used a combination of a spirit level, a tape measure, and screwed the plasterboard offcut at the bottom to keep it still while I mounted the batten to the wall. Then removed it to finish mounting once I knew it was secure. So now I've got my critical beginning and the end. Now I'm going to mark every 400. That's 80. Again, the plasterboard offcuts went back on the battens to temporarily keep them steady while mounting it further up. But having a level batten either side for reference, it now made life so much easier for checking whether I needed packers or not. So my camera ran out of battery power yesterday and I wanted to crack on. So I'm just going to quickly show you what I did, where I got up to, which was put this batten here, which is the end of the second panel that we'll be using. I've put this end one here because obviously that is the end of the wall. But the next ones that I need to put are in between here, and we've got obviously sockets in the way. So we've decided to do something slightly different. Instead of having them 400mm apart like before, instead I'm going to put one there at the side of that socket, one there. Now I know it's a little bit closer than the others, but if I went for a true 400, it would mean me chopping some stuff up. And then another one on that side there. So for quickness, I'm just going to mount them at the top in line with these boxes, get them straight at the bottom, and then start fixing them. It's easy to be clumsy on this job. So they're all on, packed as well where needed and level, and that took quite a bit of time. Now I'm going to screw some noggin / cut head rails between the tops of the battens. That way I've got another surface area for the plasterboard to be screwed to. For the bottom ones, I am just adding screws on an angle. So after battening the wall, I took more of the advice, and where the bracket is going to go for the TV, I cut some wood exactly the same thickness of the batten, roughly did it with my little compact saw, and just mounted them again with the same masonry screws to the wall itself. So today is actually plasterboarding day, and before I hide all the battens, I need to quickly mark where they are on the ceiling and the floor, and I'm going to do that now. And these marks will be useful later when I match them and draw over the plasterboard. So when I screw the plasterboard to the battens, I'm less likely going to miss. Now I've marked on the floor where the battens are, I also need to do it with the top. So I've done one there already. Let's just make that a bit bigger because the plasterboard is going to be thicker. And another one there. Obviously, I don't want to touch these electrics. I'm just going to use some chalk to say we're not going there. We can go there. we're not going there. So that's a no-go. And when I come to coving, that'll be an area I do not touch either. I'm also going to mark on the side wall, which isn't going to be covered, where the bracket is going to be roughly in line with it. So these are my sheets of plasterboard, which are 2.4 by 1.2 metres. And no, I don't need this many, but we've got other areas in the house to do. I've measured the height from the floor to the ceiling, and it is about 2.4 metres long, but we need it raised off the floor just in case there's water spillages and stuff later, and plaster will absorb the moisture. So what I've done is put some 12.5mm scraps of plasterboard as packers on the floor, and I've already measured up to the ceiling from that point, and it is 239 centimetres. So that is what I need to go and cut over there. So I'm just going to mark off a centimetre, cut it down, and then finish it with my surf form. For the first one, we just need one full sheet. We don't need to cut anything out, so this should be the easiest one. Also, another thing to worry about is when we had them delivered, they're a bit damaged on the sides. Now, I could actually ask them to take them back and bring some new ones, but that would set me back. So because I've got some cuts to do, I'm going to have the rubbish end meeting the wall, and the nice end is the finished look, which will then meet the next one. So I've got to be careful which end that I do. If you're wondering, I just went for 12.5mm square edged plasterboard. There's nothing fancy about it. This is as cheap as they come, but I will need some help moving it because you may have seen me plasterboard the ceiling, and that was quite a challenge to try and do it on my own. Now, because I'm not a professional, I don't do this every day, the first thing I'm going to do is mark a centimetre off, and then when I do score it with a Stanley knife, I can use that pencil line as a reference to see if I accidentally slip and go off track. So I'm going to try and cut it with my very sharp Stanley knife, but because there's only a centimetre, a handsaw might be better, we'll see. I'm going several times because it's such a small cut. So I'm just bending it back. I'm not too concerned about the slightly rough edge because I can smooth it over shortly. Now I need to cut that at the back. So the end is a bit rough at the moment, so I'm going to smooth it off. So now our first plasterboard is cut. I've got my impact drivers nearby and some screws attached to a magnetic wrist strap thing. Oh, and by the way, I've also done what you said and got some drywall screw bits. I've never used these before, but hopefully it will set the screw depth perfect where it doesn't protrude and doesn't sink it in too much. So I'll put that there. And I need Mr. TCD to now help me lift the first one up. One sec, I need to put it down because it's awkward. Okay. Right. So I need to try and get it in this corner. Oh, got a nice draft then. Please fit. Bugger. Bugger, bugger. Back to the cutting board to cut another centimetre off because it was too snug and catching on the ceiling. Okay, let's try again. Right. But this meant adding more packers at the bottom to lift it up to the ceiling. So now I've got it propped up and level, I need to quickly bang some screws in to keep it there. So now I've got a handful of screws in just to keep it there. I'm drawing where my battens are, meeting the top and the bottom markings. And then screw them every 20 centimetres. After some trial and error, I adjusted the drywall bit to sink the screws in just past the face of the board so they could be easily filled over later. For the second board over the sockets, this time I lifted with a makeshift foot lever, which allowed me to lift it while hitting the front of the board with a mallet and some wood to try and make an indent on the back so I knew where to cut socket holes out. We then carefully lowered it down to the floor, propped up on some planks where I could cut them out with my multi-tool. But I struggled to see the faint lines, so drew around a spare back box and repeated. Then did the same for the only other one that I could see, the outer one. So I could only initially cut the outer ones because I didn't get these marks on the back, so I've had to put it back on the wall and mallet again. So I've got my impressions, but to complete it, some areas are faint, so I'm just going over it again. Now it's secure enough to handle alone, I screwed drywall screws on throughout while avoiding my electric cables. Now this was the best bit, the final section, knowing I've almost done. A nice narrow strip that I scored along with a straight edge and folded over to cut and smooth over. And propping up was easy with my lever and screwed to the final exposed battens. Anyway, you get the gist with this. I'm going to leave this job to Mr. TCD while I go and edit the video because he's stifling up here. Woo. We've got the aircon unit on, you know. Oh, hi! Well, I am still here 2 days later, but we are seeing progress. No, we haven't got the sockets on yet. We'll deal with that in another video. But Mr. TCD has gone around every screw hole and filled it with filler. I've also asked him to do something called a pre-fill, filling the joins of the plasterboard, which I've sanded down, and I'm going to then put paper tape over it. But this time, which I'm not going to show you in this video, I will leave a link below, but this time I'm going to soak it in water first, a little bit, and then put it on some fresh new filler on there, and then I'm going to try and feather it out for hopefully a flawless finish. Also, the TV that we plan to mount on here has surrounding lights that will reflect the wall, so it has to look good. I might end up having to get a plaster in, but I'd rather have a go first. Plus, this job shouldn't take as long as it did for the ceiling in the dining room. But overall, I am very happy with how this looks. Just by removing the brickwork and putting this here, we've gained that much space in the room. But once this is painted, well, obviously we've got to think of a colour scheme. We will be putting some sort of unit down here for logs, some log storage. That's why I'm probably not going to go for a skirting board here. But I've had a good think about whether I should have stuck with dot and dab or gone for this. And really, yes, I think dot and dab would have been so much quicker because you are working to your time limits of the adhesive drying, which could be 30 minutes to an hour. I had a lot more playtime to work on this to get things right how I wanted it, which I think is a particularly forgiving method for beginners like me. But of course, if you do anything differently, if you've got any other tips and tricks, let me know in the comments, but I will be saving the dot and dab adhesive for the brick wall around the corner here. So hopefully I'll see you next week in another project, but in the meantime, I best get cracking on with paper taping. But if you do want to see me do this, I'll leave a link to a previous project in the description below. And I'm going to thin this out with water in a bucket because I need it a soggy mixture to get onto there so my paper tape will stick to the wall better. Thanks for watching.